It's game week, and we're kicking things off by examining the Buffalo Bills' initial depth chart and offering my predictions for the 2022 season today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Monday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder, we are free and available for you on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Bills is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Well, folks, it is game week. The Bills are going to play the Rams Thursday night to open the NFL season. I'm going to be in LA. I'm excited. Got the opportunity to head out there this week and be in attendance for this football game. And it is an awesome feeling knowing that, first of all, I get to be there, but also the Buffalo Bills have been chosen to face the defending Super Bowl champions to start the season. As my buddy Joe Miller would put it, we're living in wildest dreams land. We got some stuff to talk about today. The Bills released their initial depth chart, and I have a lot to say about that. I want to give you my predictions for the Bills this year, kind of talk about the schedule and the different portions of it and how I see things playing out. I'll give you my predictions for the rest of the league, including the division winners and the wild card teams. And then I do want to update my stat projections. There's been a lot that's happened since I offered my stat projections for the Bills offensive players before camp, and then obviously what we've learned since then. And so I want to take this opportunity to just tell you how I think things will be different from what I initially shared in July, now that O.J. Howard's not on the team. And we have a little bit more of an understanding of what this offense is going to be. But let's start with this Bills initial depth chart. And let's first acknowledge that this is nothing that is concrete or set in stone. There are things that you can glean from it, but we have to be cautious to not be overly married to what it says. Obviously, the Bills can adapt from it. It's a fluid situation. It could say one thing and reality is another, but there is a lot to take away from it, and I want to share my most notable takeaways. The first thing I want to get into is Spencer Brown is listed as the starting right tackle. I think that is notable. And this is something that if you've been listening to this podcast throughout the last several months, you know we've kind of wrestled with this. We've always thought of Spencer Brown as a starting right tackle, but David Quessenberry has been getting those reps, and he's been the guy on the depth chart to this point at right tackle. And then the big indicator to me was in the dress rehearsal against the Denver Broncos, week 2 of the preseason, David Quessenberry was the right tackle in that game, and Spencer Brown played, but he played after the starters left the field. And my thought was, well, if they want to get Josh Allen ready for the regular season, they want to get the starting offense together, wouldn't Spencer Brown play with the ones if he was available to play? My cousin TJ had a great take on this, and I haven't thought about it. We were texting on Sunday morning about the depth chart, and he said, quote, I'm just going to give it right to you. He said, quote, I think the reason they didn't have Brown run with the ones is because they want to knock the rust off. They didn't want to put Allen or Keenum in harm's way. Brown hasn't really had the reps. Light bulbs went off. Full credit to TJ for the take, but that makes a lot of sense to me. That's a good explanation as to why they didn't put Brown out there with the ones. As he was ramping back up, he wasn't ready to play with the ones. And maybe that wasn't necessarily an indicator that he's not the starting right tackle, but an indicator that he needed more time before they were going to put him on the field with Josh Allen. Well, more time has went on. And so I think this is now reality. It's now my expectation that Spencer Brown's going to be the starting right tackle against the Rams on Thursday night. Good take there from TJ. Other takeaways from this Bills initial depth chart. James Cook listed as running back 3 behind Zach Moss. I've been wrestling with this one too. Are the Bills going to dress 3 running backs in addition to Taiwan Jones? And I'll talk about inactive candidates here in just a moment, but is there a world where they actually dress 3? Will Zach Moss and James Cook be active on game day? I wrestle with it. I really do. I think it's possible. And in the past, that's not been what the Bills do on game days. They don't dress 3 running backs plus Taiwan Jones. It's 2 running backs plus Taiwan Jones. And I also wonder if Zach Moss is that inactive player because what does he offer? Pass blocking skills, short yardage. Well, you kind of get that in Reggie Gilliam. You get that in Devin Singletary to an extent. You get short yardage running in Josh Allen. And the problem is that none of those backs play special teams. Are you going to dress 3 running backs that don't play special teams? It's fascinating to me. But I do think that James Cook offers a different element to the offense. Are you really going to not want to have that pass catcher, that guy that you can really dictate matchups and formations with, that you can put as your running back, and next thing you know, he's a slot receiver when you motion him out? Are you going to not have that element in your offense because you want to have Zach Moss? I wrestle with it. Other notables, Isaiah McKenzie is the number 1 kick returner. James Cook, the number 2 kick returner. So if James Cook is your number 2 kick returner, that's another indicator to me, in addition to what I said about what he brings to the offense, that he's going to be an active player on game day. Khalil Shakir is the punt returner. I love that. That's one of the things that I talked about right away after they drafted Shakir, is that, hey, this is the guy that can be the punt returner. And I gained a lot of confidence watching Khalil Shakir at training camp and, of course, the preseason games. I thought he did a phenomenal job, not just from a ball handling, catching the football perspective, but a decision-making perspective. And then he actually had a couple of nice returns as well. And so Khalil Shakir has quickly gained my confidence that he can do this job well. And I think that's great because targets are going to be hard for him to come by this year. You know, he's probably wide receiver 5, maybe 4, maybe probably 5. There's not going to be a lot of footballs heading his way. How can he provide value this year? Punt returner. And then, of course, providing that depth at receiver. Shaq Lawson is defensive end 5. No surprise to me there. I think there's a good chance he's inactive on Thursday night against the Rams. Your starting corners are Kyer Elam and Dane Jackson. Christian Benford as a backup. I've had some people DM me on Twitter and said, do you think there's a chance they could platoon Kyer Elam and Christian Benford in ways that we've seen the Bills do with other players in the past, whether that's Ramon Humber and Matt Milano, Ty Nsekhe and Cody Ford? The Bills have been willing to platoon players at non-traditionally platooned positions. We'll talk about Kyer Elam in the matchup against the Rams later in the week. I think it's a decent matchup for Kyer. But I'm of the belief that he's going to be the guy opposite of Dane Jackson unless he struggles, and then you need to shuffle the deck. The tight end 2 behind Dawson Knox is Quentin Morris. How about that? Tommy Sweeney, your tight end 3. So if anything, it was more Tommy Sweeney versus O.J. Howard for that tight end 3 spot more than it was Quentin Morris, right? Quentin Morris is the number 2 tight end for this team, which is really interesting because I think he's shown so much versatility, not just from a special teams perspective. That excites me a lot. Not just from a receiving perspective, but a blocking perspective where you can get creative with how you deploy him as a blocker. And they had him doing some of the Reggie Gilliam stuff in the preseason. And you feel good about him being flexed out and blocking in space, bunch sets. You want to run a quick hitter? You want Quentin Morris out there to block. I think that's a great thing. I think he's checking a lot of boxes for this team. A lot of value with Quentin Morris. A lot more value than Tommy Sweeney. And then also, how about this one? Terrell Bernard as the Sam linebacker. Very, very interesting to me over Tyrell Dodson. And so when we say Sam linebacker, think A.J. Klein role. And as a gap shooter, that's great. As a matchup player in coverage, that's great. But as a processor, as a downhill player, as a take-on defender, you feel like Tyrell Dodson gives you a little bit more there. So I'm interested in that linebacker situation when they want to go 3 linebackers. Is it really Bernard? Is it situational? Do they sprinkle in Dotson? They have some intriguing options there. Let's talk about the inactive candidates. So those are my big takeaways from the depth chart. A lot of it was exactly what you would think it would be. But in terms of inactive candidates, remember, they have 53 on the roster. The Bills can dress 47 players on game day as long as 8 of them are offensive linemen. And of course, the Bills are always going to dress at least 8 offensive linemen. So that means you're going to have 6 inactive players. And most years, I feel pretty good about who those 6 players are going to be. Not this year. Not this year. My brother, Frank, who is phenomenal at projecting inactive players, I said, hey, look, if everyone's healthy, who are your inactive players? And his initial list was Tommy Sweeney, Bobby Hart, Jamison Crowder, James Cook, and Shaq Lawson. And I'm like, whoa, are you serious about James Cook? I submitted to him that I think it might be Tommy Doyle, Jamison Crowder, Shaq Lawson, Tommy Sweeney, and Cam Lewis. But here's how I think you can look at this. There's a lot of candidates. I think 1 wide receiver will be inactive. I think it will be Jamison Crowder if Isaiah McKenzie is healthy, because Jamison Crowder is a slot only that doesn't play special teams. I think that's a slam dunk reason for you to be an inactive player. I think 1 offensive lineman. And to me, it comes down to Tommy Doyle or Bobby Hart. The reason I think it will be Tommy Doyle is because Bobby Hart can play 4 spots. Tommy Doyle maybe 2. I know they tinkered with him at guard. I think they're a lot more comfortable with Bobby Hart at guard. So I think Tommy Doyle has a good chance of being an inactive player. And plus, David Quessenberry can play guard as well. I think 1 defensive end, and it potentially could be matchup dictated between Shaq Lawson and Boogie Basham as an inactive player. I think 1 corner will be inactive, and I think it's going to be Cam Lewis. I think Cam Lewis is a great backup to Taron Johnson. But with the uncertainty with the corner situation, I don't think it's going to be Christian Benford. You're going to want that outside option to be available to you. And so you feel good about Saron Neal as a potential backup as well to Taron Johnson. So I think Cam Lewis is likely an inactive player. I think 1 running back's inactive. I think it's going to be Zach Moss. But there's an interesting conversation to be had there. I think there's a chance of a linebacker, Balin Spector. If Bernard, Dotson, and Medikevich can all play special teams, do you need a 4th linebacker dressed on game days that could play special teams? I think he's a reasonable option. And then if you feel like you have to have Cam Lewis active for more depth at corner, keeping in mind that he's been cross-trained at safety, is there a world where maybe a DeMar Hamlin's inactive? So those are the candidates. That's kind of where my mind goes. 6 of them, right? They got to come up with 6 inactive players. And like I said, normally I have a lot better feel for it, but this is a unique situation this year with how the scheme's going to evolve, how the personnel stacks up. And if you can guess all 6 for Thursday night, then you deserve a prize. Speaking of prizes, the NFL season is here, and I cannot wait to make entries over at Prize Picks. I've been enjoying the Prize Picks opportunities with college football, but as we know, NFL is king. Prize Picks is my favorite daily fantasy resource. Here's how it works. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other players. It's just you versus the projections. And Prize Picks has literally any sport that you can imagine. The NFL, Major League Baseball, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, esports, NASCAR, tennis, you name it, they have it. They have cricket and Euro basketball, even disc golf and boxing. And entries can be made very quickly in 60 seconds or less. It's literally that easy. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to use our promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, so let's predict the Bills' record this year. And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sit here and go game by game. Los Angeles Rams win, Tennessee Titans loss. Like, I want to look at it a little bit differently. Because I think it's better and more appropriate to look at the season in terms of chunks. And so I have it broken into 3 chunks. The first 6, the middle 5, and the last 6. And so you have this first 6-game stretch, weeks 1 through 6 before the bye. And you are at the Rams, home against Tennessee, at Miami, at Baltimore, home against Pittsburgh, at Kansas City. Another game I'll be at, by the way. And then the bye week. All right. This is not a easy stretch of games by any means. You have some good football teams here. I look at this stretch of games, and I think it's probably a 4-2 stretch. It's tough out the gate, right? You've got a new offensive play caller. You got some new pieces on offense. You've got no Trey White on defense. And some good football teams. Defending Super Bowl champions, the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs from last year. 2 playoff teams in Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Kansas City was in the AFC Championship game. Miami has been a winning record team the last 2 years. You're going to their place. It's going to be hot as hell. They got a new scheme offensively that's going to be a lot better. Defensively, everyone's back, plus like young studs in Jalen Phillips and Javon Holland and Channing Tindall's there. They brought in Melvin Ingram. They brought in Trey Flowers. Like, defensively, that team's going to be really good. Of course, the Ravens, who are bringing back a lot of players and is good every year, and they're healthy now. So it's a tough stretch of games. I think 4-2 would be a pretty good record through those first 6 games. Now, let me say this, and nobody's going to like what I'm about to say right now, because we're all excited about Thursday night against the Rams. If you were forced to pick one game of the first 6 that the Bills lose, you had to eat an L no matter what, and you get to pick it, you should pick the Rams. You should. Because it's the only non-AFC game in the first 6. Those head-to-head matchups against Baltimore, against Kansas City, against Tennessee, against Miami, those are going to matter a ton. Conference record matters a ton. You want the number 1 seed in the playoffs? Win your head-to-head games and have the best record in playoff games. So as much as we want to start 1-0, and I hope the Bills do, right? I want to win all 6. Don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. But if there's a least important game among the first 6, it's the Rams game. That's the one. If you could afford to lose one, you should pick the Rams. As much as we all want to go out there and claim a dub, knock off the Super Bowl champions in front of the nation, I mean, I'm going out to LA. You think I don't want to watch the Bills win? I just want that to sink in. Understand the importance of these games, and the AFC games are just more important than the NFC games. And you got 6 games, 5 of them against really teams that you think could be playoff teams, right? Actually, you look at it, all of them had a winning record last year. It's a good stretch. Tough teams. I think 4-2 would be a nice record for the Bills after the first 6. And you have a week 7 bye. Then you go with the next 5-game stretch, weeks 8 through 12. Home against Green Bay, at the Jets. You host Minnesota, you host the Browns, and then you go to the Lions on Thanksgiving. To me, this is a 4-1 stretch right here. I think you've got some really manageable opponents here. Your toughest game is Green Bay. They're at home. The Bills are at home. Coming out of the bye, you feel good about that. Another game I'll be at, by the way. Right now, I'm definitely going to the Rams, Chiefs, and Packers games. I don't know about the rest of the year, but those 3 are happening. But I think that's a 4-1 stretch. I really do. Then you have weeks 13 through 18, the final 6 games of the year, where it's at New England, you host the Jets and Dolphins, at Chicago, at the Bengals, host the Patriots to close out the year. I think that's either a 4-2 stretch or a 5-1 stretch. And so I think the Bills will either finish 12-5 or 13-4. That's kind of how I look at it. Again, I'm not going to sit here and get in the weeds over which 4 games they're going to lose or which 5 games I think they're going to lose. I think if you look at it in chunks, you go 4-2, 4-1, and then 4-2/5-1. That's 12-5 or 13-4. So maybe you didn't love the 4-2 start, but look at the big picture here. The schedule softens up a ton after the bye, and after the bye, you get this midseason acquisition of Trey White. That's my expectation as we see him in Week 8. Another way to look at projecting wins and losses is, and my buddy Jamie Eisner, work with him at the Draft Network. He's phenomenal with projections and all that type of stuff. And when we talk about schedules and forecasting wins and losses, he likes to say, first thing you need to do is identify the games in which the team you think has a 60% chance or less of winning the game and highlight them. And so I went through and I identified the games on the schedule that I think the Bills have a 60% or less chance of winning. And what's cool about this is I made my list and then I affirmed it with Mike Clay of ESPN, who does phenomenal work with projections. And we had the exact same list. Those games are the Rams, Ravens, Chiefs, Packers, and Bengals. I think those 5 games are ones that you look at as get a 60% chance or less of winning. I'd throw 2 more into the mix. Not necessarily that it's 60%, but 2 more games that worry me. I think Week 3 against Miami, I've already talked about this, on the road. Bills are on a short week. Miami, a lot of hype there. Unbelievable speed on that offense. And defensively, they're really friggin' good. So I think that's a game that I have a level of concern with. And then also, you can laugh at me if you want, but Detroit on Thanksgiving, going to their place, short week. I know it's a short week for them, but you're on the road, and it's a football team that has an us against the world mentality. They're physical, they run the football, and they're not going to back down. That team was not very good record-wise last year, but man, they competed their asses off. So I think the Bills are going to beat the Lions on Thanksgiving. Don't get me wrong, but it's a game that I do have some level of concern. So if you have those 5 that are flagged by me and Mike Clay as 60% chance or less of winning, and then you add in those 2 more, you've got like 7 games that you think are losable. Now, you're not going to lose all 7 of them, but I think it's reasonable to think that of those, you can find 2 or 3 losses. And then, look, it's the NFL, man. Stuff happens. Sometimes you lose to the Jaguars. Sometimes you lose to the Steelers. It's not all chalk. You're not going to go out and win every single game you're supposed to win. And so that's kind of my mindset. When I think about this team and how this season is going to unfold, those are the things on my mind, from the stretches of play and then kind of looking at those red flag games, if you will, that you think are quote unquote losable, but also being mindful that you just never go out and win every game you're supposed to. Bills are a good football team. In the next segment here, I'm going to give you my predictions for how the regular season's going to end and the division winners and the playoff teams. But I think 13-4, 12-5, that's kind of where I think this team will settle when it's all said and done. All right, so let's predict the league. I'm going to give you my division champions and my wild card picks this year. But first, let me go back and revisit my 2021 picks. I think I did pretty decent. I had 5 of 8 division winners predicted correctly, and 9 of 14 playoff teams predicted correctly. Last year, I had the AFC division winners as the Bills, Ravens, Titans, and Chiefs. Ravens got injured and didn't win it. And then my wild card teams were the Patriots, Browns, and Chargers. Obviously, the Browns were banged up all year. Patriots was correct. And then the Chargers were a win against the Raiders away from getting in there. In the NFC, my division winners were Washington, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and Seattle. Fitz going down for Washington obviously didn't help with that projection. And then Seattle, I shouldn't have drank the Kool-Aid at all. And I'm not even like a enthusiast for Pete Carroll or anything like that, but I thought they'd be better than they were last year. And then my wild card teams in the NFC last year were the Rams, 49ers, and Cowboys, and all 4 of them were playoff teams. So that's how I got 5 of 8 division winners and 9 of 14 playoff teams. This year, These are my division winners for the AFC. In the East, the Bills. In the North, the Bengals. I like this team. Joe Burrow's a stud. Their O-line's better. All the weapons are back in terms of the receivers. Now it's a new tight end situation, but defensively is where I really get excited about the Bengals. I think they've got a great coordinator in Lou Anarumo. I love how they're interchangeable with their fronts. I love how they blend their coverages. They got a nice squad. They do. In the AFC South, I have the Colts. I think that team's going to be really good on defense. They're going to run the football. They're a little more explosive in the passing game. Matt Ryan should be a more steady player than Carson Wentz. And then I'm just not in on the Titans, Jaguars, or the Texans. So I think the Colts are probably your 4 seed and win the South. In the West, it's the Chiefs. I'm not ready to move off the Chiefs. They got the best quarterback in the game. I love their young talent on defense. Their offensive line is stacked. Andy Reid, it's still their division. My wild card teams in the AFC are the Chargers, the Ravens, and the Dolphins. Maybe the Dolphins surprise you. You've heard me talk about why I'm in on that team. The O-line is way better. They've got several new starters, Teron Armstead, Connor Williams. They've got a plan to run the football, good scheme with Mike McDaniel. And then look at the receivers, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Cedric Wilson. Defensively, they're going to be at least a top 10 team defensively. Their D-line's loaded. They got ball hawks in the back end. Javon Holland's a rising star. I think they can really do it. Now, the challenge for the Dolphins is they got a tough schedule, especially early on. So they need to hit the gate running. But I have some concern about the Raiders and Broncos. Like, I think most people would expect them to be playoff teams, and maybe they will be. They certainly can be. The Raiders, as much as I want to buy in on it, their O-line stinks and their interior defensive line stinks. Like, those are not spots to have issues, right? You wouldn't choose those spots to be problematic for your football team. And I think they got a lot of questions at corner as well. The Broncos, I don't know. Defensively, I'm a little concerned. They don't have players in that front seven that I think can really force the action. They're a little bit to me like the Patriots from last year, where Russ Wilson's obviously a better player than Mac Jones by a million times, but I worry about it all coming together this year. Everything's new in terms of scheming quarterback offensively, working back Cortland Sutton. Defensively, they need some players to emerge. It's a tough division. I think they'll be like a 9-win team and not make the playoffs. In the NFC, your division winners, I have the Eagles in the East. I think they have the best roster in the NFC. That's not considering quarterback. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is your wild card there. The NFC North, the Packers, I think they're decisively the best team in that division. Same thing with the South, the Buccaneers. I think they're decisively the best team in that division. And then decisively in the West, I think the Rams are the best team. So Eagles, Packers, Bucks, Rams. I'd be surprised if that wasn't like a very common slate of division winners. My wild card teams, and my goodness, I think there's 6 teams that could claim this. 49ers, I'm going with 49ers, Vikings, and Cowboys. I hate all 3 of those picks, to be honest with you. 49ers, we have no idea how good Trey Lance is. The Vikings, I mean, I think that I like a lot about what they have offensively. I like Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson in that offense. They got some decent depth in terms of playmakers. But defensively, I don't know about that team. I just don't know what that team's going to be like. But I think they could be the best of the worst. They could probably win. They might win 8 or 9 games and get in. And then Dallas, that's just me kind of buying in on Dak, buying in on an aggressive defense with a lot of speed. But, I mean, if the Cowboys won 7 games this year, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think the Lions, the Saints, and the Panthers are right there to be in this conversation. So that's kind of how I see this playing out. Real quick on my updated stats, just with O.J. Howard's not even on the team, with Isaiah McKenzie being the primary slot, with my belief that Devin Singletary is really going to be the focal point of this backfield, I wanted to update my statistical projections this year. Now, with Josh Allen, I'm not changing a single thing. I think he completes 67% of his passes, 4,720 yards, 38 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's the passing output for Josh Allen. Nothing changed there. I do think that the disbursement of that production amongst the receivers does look different. So Steph Diggs, I have 110 catches, 1,310 yards, 10 touchdowns. I didn't really change that. Gabriel Davis, I bumped him up just a little bit. 69 catches, 1,005 yards, 9 touchdowns. Jamison Crowder went way, way down. 20 catches, 200 yards, no touchdowns. Isaiah McKenzie goes up. 60 catches, 665 yards, 5 touchdowns. Did not change Dawson Knox. 60 catches, 715 yards, 9 touchdowns. But I did change the other tight end bucket because I had O.J. Howard having some market share here. I'm just putting it other tight end bucket with 16 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. James Cook, 40 catches, 345 yards and a touchdown. Devin Singletary, 20 catches, 150 yards and a touchdown. And then other receivers, 25 catches, 220 yards and a touchdown. So kind of reapplying an over projection for Jamison Crowder and O.J. Howard, and then dispersing that more proportionally as to how I think things will shake out. Running the football, I just basically gassed up Devin Singletary. No, what I didn't do that. I took something away from James Cook and applied it to Zach Moss because maybe I'm crazy, but I think they're going to get 3 running backs going. So I didn't change a thing about Devin Singletary. 190 rushes, 880 yards, 6 touchdowns. James Cook, 90 rushes, 405 yards, 2 touchdowns. Josh Allen, 105 rushes, 705 yards, 7 touchdowns. And then Zach Moss, this is kind of like the Zach Moss / Reggie Gilliam, 65 rushes, 250 yards, 4 touchdowns. So just some minor tweaks there to reflect my belief in how the rushing output is going to be dispersed. And then, of course, what I've already said about with the passing game with really Jamison Crowder and O.J. Howard not being the players I thought they would be in this offense when I did this, what was it, like early July? So there's been a lot of new information, but I do need to solidify it going into the season so that way I can dunk and say I did a great job or act like I never made those projections at all. All right, folks, that's it for today. Let's talk about the rest of this week. Tomorrow, oh man, I'm so excited. It's game weeks. Comprehensive primer tomorrow. And we got a lot of new listeners. And so I'm excited for you guys to see our comprehensive primer and how we get ready for football games. We're going to get into the weeds with the Los Angeles Rams. You're going to know everything about that football team, the challenges that they present, what the Bills need to do to win the game. Wednesday will be our crossover discussion with Locked On Rams. Thursday, we'll put out a podcast before the game, early that morning, of course. Final thoughts, where I dump everything else that I have to say about the game in a segment. We'll talk to banged up Bills about the injuries, and I'll give you my game predictions as well. Friday, we recap the game. So it's going to be a fun week. It's going to be here before we know it. Bills are going to play the Rams. I don't want to drive. I'm not driving. I don't want to fly out to LA and watch the Bills lose. So go Bills. I'm excited for it. Excited for this week. Excited for you to be here for this season. We got a lot to talk about. We got a good football team to talk about, and it's going to be fun. So make sure that you are subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.